The samurai secret that makes you rich is not about working harder. It is about understanding time as a weapon. And by the end of what you are about to hear, you will never look at your finances the same way again. Most people believe that speed is power, that the faster they move, the faster their resources grow. But that belief is exactly what keeps them broke. It is not laziness that destroys financial futures, and it is not ignorance either. It is impatience dressed up as ambition, speed wearing the mask of strategy. The moment you feel urgency around your capital, you have already lost. That urgency is not a signal to act. It is a signal that your mind has been hijacked by fear, and a mind ruled by fear will always make decisions that feel bold in the moment and catastrophic in the aftermath. The warrior who swings blindly does not show courage. He shows panic. And panic in the financial arena is the most expensive emotion a person can carry. Every unnecessary risk you take is born from the same lie, that waiting is losing. The markets pulse, the numbers shift, someone online claims they doubled their provision in 48 hours, and suddenly your discipline evaporates. You are no longer a strategist. You are a gambler with a philosophy problem. The samurai did not fight like that. They moved not because opportunity appeared, but because the moment was precise, prepared, and inevitable. That is the difference between a warrior and a desperate man, and that difference, compounded over decades, is the exact gap between those who die with regret and those who leave legacies. Picture this. You wake up, and before your feet even touch the floor, you are already calculating. Market opened. Something moved. Someone in your social feed is showing a screenshot, numbers, percentages, a car they claim they bought with 3 trades, and before you have had a single clear thought, your hand is already reaching for the phone. That is not a strategy. That is a behavioral trap, and the science behind it is not complicated. The human mind was built for immediate feedback. Ancient hunters needed fast signals. Danger here, food there, move now. That wiring worked perfectly for 10,000 years of survival. But in the world of compound resources and long-horizon prosperity, that same wiring becomes your greatest enemy. It turns every market fluctuation into an emergency, and every slow month into a reason to abandon a plan that was working in silence. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time a rushed financial decision made your life better 6 months later? 400 years ago, Japan was a nation of fire. The Sengoku period, the era of the warring states, was a world of constant conflict where every warlord scrambled for immediate dominance, men with larger armies and bolder attacks, and the burning ambition to move first and fastest. They all consumed themselves in the process. There was one man who watched every single one of them collapse. A man who had been taken as a hostage child at age 6 by rival clans, and who grew up understanding instinctively that the powerful could destroy you the moment you gave them a reason. His name was Tokugawa Ieyasu, and where every other warlord fought for quick conquest, Ieyasu was building something none of them were interested in: duration. He allied himself with Oda Nobunaga when Nobunaga was ascending, and did not challenge him, simply waited. When Nobunaga died, he aligned with Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the next great power, and watched as Hideyoshi spent the best warriors of every rival clan in a devastating campaign in Korea, while Ieyasu sent a token force and preserved his resources while others bled theirs dry. Every other lord was playing the same game. Only Ieyasu was playing a different one entirely. When Hideyoshi died in 1598, Ieyasu had waited over 15 years for that precise opening, and when the Battle of Sekigahara came in 1600, it was less a battle than the execution of a plan that had been quietly compounding for decades. He did not win that day because he was the fastest or the most aggressive. He won because no one else in Japan had practiced waiting long enough to understand what it actually builds. In his final written instructions recorded in 1604, Ieyasu left this: "Forbearance is the root of quietness and assurance forever. Not boldness, not aggression. Forbearance, quiet, deliberate, strategic restraint." And the doctrine built from that single principle sustained 250 years of prosperity for an entire nation. If one man's patience could produce 2 centuries of peace and accumulated treasure, What could your patience produce over 30 years of compounding decisions? There is a moment right now, as that realization settles, where you feel the weight of every rushed decision you have ever made, and alongside that weight comes the quiet excitement of knowing it is not too late. The mathematics of time has not changed. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or your country in the comments below, because the people absorbing this lesson today, from wherever they are in the world, are already ahead of 90% of those around them. There is a principle buried inside the Tao Te Ching that most people walk past without registering it. Laozi wrote it plainly over 2,500 years ago. The Tao does nothing, yet nothing is left undone. Not eventually accomplished, not mostly accomplished. Everything. Accomplished without a single moment of panic, without one rushed decision made from fear. This is Wu Wei. Effortless action. Not laziness, not passivity, but the art of aligning yourself so precisely with the natural direction of things that your output exceeds your effort, the way a river exceeds its own exertion by simply moving with gravity rather than against it. Apply that to your finances, and the picture becomes very clear. Effortless wealth does not look like a person glued to a screen at 2 in the morning recalculating the next move. It looks like a person who built a system in January and then let it run, who makes the same disciplined allocation every single month without drama or deviation, who stopped checking the balance obsessively because they understood that the act of watching does not accelerate the growth. The compounding mechanism does not care about your anxiety. It operates whether you are watching or not. During the early Edo period, following Ieyasu's unification, the merchant class of Japan discovered this in practice. The samurai, who had structured their resources into patient, long-horizon rice trade allocations, watched their reserves grow in silence, while those who chased volatile war contracts lost everything in a single season. Their patience was not a personality trait. It was trained discipline, a direct extension of the battlefield principle that you do not strike until the moment of certain advantage. Consider the oak tree. It produces no timber in a season, none in a decade, but give it 100 years, and it has become the foundation of a house, a ship, a legacy. Every small decision you make today, to save a percentage before spending, to resist the impulsive trade, to add one disciplined contribution to a growing pool, is an oak seed pressed into soil. You cannot see it working in the moment, but it is working. If what you are hearing is resonating, this is the moment to like this video. Every samurai needed warriors who understood the same doctrine walking beside them. In the Book of Five Rings, Miyamoto Musashi wrote something the strategy world consistently overlooks. Do nothing that is of no use. Not move fast, not strike often. Do nothing that is of no use. Every transaction that does not serve the long-term direction of your resources is useless motion, and every emotional reaction to a market shift is useless motion that carries a price you do not see until much later. The warriors who accumulated generational wealth in feudal Japan were not the ones with the most swords. They were the ones disciplined enough to never draw a sword they did not absolutely have to draw. That is Wu Wei applied to treasure. Preserve, align, allow, and let the current carry the weight you refuse to carry alone. Volatile markets are not the enemy. Your reaction to them is, and the difference between those two things is the entire game. A seasoned warrior does not panic when the battlefield shifts because he planned for the shift during the quiet before the battle, when his mind was clear and fear was absent. This is the single behavioral difference between those who survive financial storms and those destroyed by them. One group makes decisions inside the storm, the other group made their decisions before it arrived and simply holds their position while the storm moves through. Yamamoto Kansuke was a military strategist who served the Takeda clan in the 16th century, and his work, the Heiho Okugisho, The Secret of High Strategy, teaches something that cuts against everything the modern financial world wants you to believe. The battle should be won before it begins, not through superior force, but through superior preparation. He wrote not of winning in the moment of conflict, but of removing the uncertainty from conflict entirely through architecture. When you have built the correct structure, the outcome is already decided and the fight itself becomes ceremonial. Translate that directly. Most people walk into volatile market seasons with no predetermined plan, which means when prices drop sharply, they sell from panic, and when prices spike, they buy from greed, reacting to a battlefield that keeps changing beneath them because they built no architecture to stand on. What does the architecture actually look like? A written commitment made before the market moves. A fixed percentage allocated regardless of conditions. A predetermined threshold at which you add, and a threshold at which you do nothing at all. Rules decided by your calm mind specifically designed to govern the behavior of your frightened one. Certainty is not about predicting the future. It is about removing your future self's ability to make emotional decisions in the moments when emotion is loudest. Now consider Kaizen, the Japanese principle of continuous 1% improvement. Applied to the management of your resources, it is almost offensively simple, and that simplicity is precisely what makes it unstoppable. You do not need to double your capital this year. You need to be 1% more disciplined this week than you were last week, 1% more consistent with saving, 1% more deliberate with spending, 1% more resistant to the impulse that has cost you the most. 1% daily improvement compounded over a single year does not produce a 1% better result. It produces something 37 times better than the starting point, not because the individual improvements were dramatic, but because each one compounded on everything that came before it. The warrior who practiced one sword movement more carefully each day did not become slightly better over a year. He became transformatively better, because discipline compounds the same way capital does. And the flip side of that is equally true and far more brutal. The warrior who breaks the chain even once does not become slightly worse. He disrupts the entire compounding sequence. This is the hidden cost of the single emotional decision. It does not just cost you the money. It breaks the chain of discipline that was building something invisible and irreplaceable in the background. There is a weapon that requires no blade, no formal training, and no exceptional intelligence, and it is available to every single person reading this right now. That weapon is the willingness to wait, not passive waiting, but strategic waiting. The kind that observes the undisciplined around you making increasingly desperate decisions and simply refuses to join them. While they chase the next return, you build systems. While they panic sell at the bottom, you hold. While they celebrate the next trend that will vanish in 6 months, you are silent, consistent, and compounding. This is not patience as a temperamental virtue. This is patience as predation, and the samurai understood it as a tactical advantage over the impatient majority that does not require you to be smarter than the market, only to outlast the people who keep reacting to it. Over 420 years ago, in 1495, a warlord named Hojo Sun wrote 21 articles for those who served under him. He had risen from relative obscurity to become one of the most powerful daimyo in the Kanto region, not through inherited bloodline or sudden fortune, but through relentless discipline and a frugality so radical it became doctrine. One of his articles stated this plainly: "When you appear before others, do not try to look splendid. To consider your plain possessions a dishonor and borrow finery from others is needless ostentation and invites ridicule." A warlord with the military power to demand every luxury was actively teaching the opposite. And the reason is something most people still refuse to accept. Visible wealth is the enemy of actual wealth. The moment you spend to signal prosperity, you are making a withdrawal from the very machine that produces it. Every unnecessary display delays the compounding, and compounding is the only mechanism that actually works at the scale that changes a family's trajectory across generations. This is not a philosophy of deprivation. It is a philosophy of strategic invisibility. The warrior who conserves resources does not live less. He builds more, and when the moment of certain advantage finally arrives, he acts from a position of overwhelming prepared strength, while those around him scramble with depleted reserves and no architecture to stand on. Systematizing your finances means building a machine that operates without requiring your emotional participation. Automate the allocation before the paycheck arrives. Predetermine the rules. Remove the decision from the moment of temptation. Hojo Sound's articles returned again and again to this same axis: structure over impulse, routine over reaction, preparation over desperate response in the middle of a crisis. A system that runs without your fear running it is the closest practical expression of Wu Wei that exists in modern financial life. You build it once, with clarity, and then you let it work. It does not need your motivation on the hard days. It does not need your excitement. It does not need you to believe in it when you are exhausted. It only needs your consistency, and consistency is the one thing a well-built system can enforce even when your discipline is temporarily spent. Hojo-san lived to the age of 87, and he built a legacy not through single moments of brilliance, but through decades of systematic, patient, structural discipline. That lifespan was the compounding period, and what it produced outlasted him by generations. Laozi said something in the Tao Te Ching that settles differently once you have absorbed everything that came before it. He said, "Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. The entire forest, every mountain range, every river canyon carved through solid rock over millions of years of silent, unhurried movement, all of it accomplished without a single moment of panic, without one act of desperation, without a single rushed decision born from the fear of falling behind." The oak does not negotiate with the soil. The river does not argue with the stone. They simply continue, and the continuation itself is the force. Day after day, year after year, century after century, and the result is not merely growth, it is inevitability. This is what the samurai embedded in warfare and what the wisest among them carried into every dimension of their lives. When you align with the natural mechanics of time and allow the compounding system to run uninterrupted, you are no longer hoping for prosperity. You are executing a mathematical certainty, and the only thing standing between you and that certainty is the willingness to stay in the room when nothing visible is happening yet, to maintain the system on the days when you feel nothing, to resist the seductive noise of speed when your quiet strategy is already doing precisely what it was built to do. Tokugawa Ieyasu waited over 40 years from his childhood captivity to the day he became the undisputed ruler of a unified Japan, and 250 years of peace followed that wait. His accumulated treasure, his legacy, his family name, all of it purchased not with gold alone, but with decades of invisible, structural, compounding discipline that everyone around him was too impatient to practice. Every authority this lesson draws from arrives at the same destination through a different path. Laozi through the flow of nature, Yamamoto Kansuke through the architecture of certain victory, Hojo-san through radical frugality and structural discipline, Tokugawa Ieyasu through the lived proof of the longest game in Japanese history. They are all saying the same thing in different languages across different centuries. Do not rush. Build the structure. Feed the machine. Protect the chain. Remove the emotion. And then allow the system to do what systems built on truth always do. Produce results that exceed what any single act of urgency could ever manufacture, not because you were exceptional, but because you were consistent when everyone else gave up. Speed is noise. Patience, structured and disciplined and enforced by architecture rather than willpower alone, is signal. And signal compounded over time does not produce an edge. It produces a different category of outcome entirely. If this lesson carved something real into you today, you are already on the path. This channel exists to give you that edge one principle at a time. Stay close, because the next lesson is already waiting. The samurai who endures the silence longest wins. Not sometimes. Always.